On June 29, 1966, Bob Dylan was involved in a devastating motorcycle accident. The singer thankfully survived the crash, but the accident significantly halted both his career and the course of music history. However, there is a conspiracy theory that there was no crash. Instead, Dylan pretended to be in an accident, and this allowed him to escape the clutches of fame that was almost sending him to an early grave. Was Dylan genuinely injured in this crash, or did Dylan manage to hoodwink the entire world? On July 25, 1965, Dylan stood in front of 100,000 adoring fans at Newport Folk Festival. Instead of picking up an acoustic guitar and belting out folk ballads, Dylan plugged in an electric guitar. This simple change aroused fury within the crowd and is known as the moment when Dylan went electric. For some fans, Dylan abandoned his folk roots and was selling out for rock and roll. A month earlier, Dylan performed in Manchester, England, and was heckled by a fan who referred to him as Judas. But what folk music lost, rock music gained. Dylan's first full rock album, Highway 61 Revisited, is considered one of the greatest albums of all time. And now he had a potentially dangerous amount of power, fame, and attention. However, the stardom would come to a grinding halt a year later. News broke that Bob Dylan, one of the most influential people on the planet, was involved in a motorcycle crash. In June 1966, Dylan paid a visit to his then manager Albert Grossman, who lived in Woodstock in upstate New York. Dylan had an uneventful trip to his manager's house, but it was on the way home that things took a dark turn. Dylan was driving his Triumph T100 motorcycle. He was just outside Grossman's house, and what happened next remains a mystery. The details of what occurred altered throughout the decades, and there are mixed accounts of the cause and the severity of the crash. As Michael Hill, a reporter for the Associated Press, wrote, "The sun got in his eyes, the bike slipped on an oily patch, he flew off the bike, he simply tipped over, he broke his back, he got a concussion, that is, unless he didn't really hurt himself, or maybe the crash was a tall tale." News of the accident was first reported in the New York Times, but with very little detail. The story was merely 2 sentences long, yet Bob Dylan, arguably one of the biggest celebrities in the world at the time, was involved in a motorcycle crash. The headline read, "Dylan Hurt in Cycle Mishap." The short article wrote, "Bob Dylan, the folk singer and songwriter, is under doctor's care for injuries suffered in a motorcycle accident. A representative for Mr. Dylan said the injuries have forced the cancellation of a concert scheduled for Saturday night at the Tate Bowl in New Haven." The lack of details was concerning for fans around. And this is not a conspiracy that surfaced during the age of the internet, but something which emerged soon afterward. Information came out, and a lot of it was treated with suspicion. The first red flag is that there was no police report, nor was there an ambulance report. For most major road accidents, the police or an ambulance arrives, and there is paperwork documenting what happened. None of this exists when it comes to Dylan's crash. The explanation behind this is that what happened during this crash merely required a trip to the doctor's office. Howard Soons, who wrote a biography on Dylan, said that Bob's wife Sarah Lowndes was following him behind in her car. So she witnessed the crash and helped carry him back to Grossman's home. He was then moved to a doctor's home in Middletown. Dylan did not want to go to the hospital, and instead lived in a third-floor bedroom of the doctor at Thaler's house. He stayed there for a month until he fully recovered. While this seems like a believable sequence of events, Ed Thaler's wife has said something peculiar. Interestingly, she does not recall Bob showing any signs of injury. Dylan had apparently cracked several vertebrae, which meant that he could no longer play guitar, but she didn't witness anything wrong with him. Vertebrae are small bones in your back, and breaking a bone typically involves going for an x-ray and getting referred beyond your general doctor. Soons also spoke to Grossman's wife Sally and reported that Dylan was kind of moaning and groaning, but noticed no obvious signs of injuries. The filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker visited Dylan here and said he didn't appear very knocked out by the accident. This has led to an alternative theory that the crash certainly happened, but Bob exaggerated his injuries. But if it was a hoax or an exaggeration, why would he do it? And even still, why would he not instead feign injury inside the comfort of his own home? A reason why Dylan may have decided to lay low at this doctor's house is because his fans reportedly knew where he lived. He regularly came across people looking to mooch off him, looking to rob him, and looking for him to protest with them. His home at the time was not the safest place to live, and was not a sanctuary where he could escape the clutches of fame. Throughout the years, Dylan would continue to talk about this accident, and then speak about how it benefited his life. 3 years after his accident, he told Rolling Stone magazine, "I was on the road for almost 5 years. It wore me down. I was on drugs, a lot of things just to keep going, you know? And I don't want to live that way anymore. Then in 1984, he told the same magazine, "Then I had that motorcycle accident, which put me out of commission. Then when I woke up and caught my senses, I realized I was just working for all these leeches. And I didn't want to do that. Plus I had a family, and I just wanted to see my kids." This is where the motorcycle accident and subsequent hiatus became incredibly convenient for Dylan. By the time of the accident, Dylan had become stepfather to Sarah's daughter Maria. His son Jesse was born in January 1966, followed by his daughter Andrea in 1967, followed by Samuel in 1968, and Jakob in 1969. So the motorcycle accident allowed him to be around during these important years, instead of being on tour. But ultimately, we should probably give Dylan the benefit of the doubt. If he says that he was in a motorcycle accident, then we should respect him enough to believe what he says. The problem with this is that Dylan has been incredibly unreliable about his own life, and one of the most bizarre conspiracy theories about this accident came from Dylan himself. There are many aspects of Bob Dylan's life that remain a mystery, and there is even evidence of Dylan telling the media lies about his own life. He could be doing this for a range of reasons. Dylan may enjoy adding to the legend surrounding himself. He is also known for pranking journalists, and he may also be trying to spread misinformation to protect his own private life. According to Tom Taylor from Far Out magazine, over the years he has seeded stories that he was raised in the circus, that he ran away from home as a boy, and there is even a tale in his book about being wowed by Joe Tex on the Johnny Carson show in the late 80s, even though Tex died in 1982. It was in 2012 that Dylan had one of his most bizarre interviews and proposed a strange theory about his motorcycle accident. Dylan handed the interviewer a book about a man named Bobby Zimmerman. He was a member of the Hells Angels and died in a motorcycle accident in 1961. The strange coincidence is that Bob Dylan's real name is Robert Zimmerman. In the article, Rolling Stone reported that Bobby Zimmerman died within weeks of the September 1961 New York Times live review that gave Dylan his first big break. Dylan seems to suggest that it was this Hells Angel that took over his soul and brought him his songwriting gift. Added to this coincidence is the fact that the book was written by Keith Zimmerman and Kent Zimmerman. And if you're confused by this theory, you should be. Dylan told the baffled interviewer, "Now you can put this together any way you want. You can work on it any way you want. Transfiguration. You can go and learn about it from the Catholic Church. You can learn about it in some old mystical books, but it's a real concept. It's happened throughout the ages. Nobody knows who it happened to or why, but you get real proof of it here and there. I mean, look at all the connecting things. Motorcycles, Bobby Zimmerman, Keith and Ken Zimmerman. And there's more to it than even that. If you went to find this guy's family, you'd find a whole bunch more that connected. I'm just explaining it to you." I've looked at Reddit forums and fan sites about this interview, and many fans believe that Dylan was being sincere and not simply trying to troll the journalist. Although Dylan came from a Jewish background, he became a born-again Christian in the late 1970s and is a very spiritual and superstitious person. But rather than transubstantiation, there is probably a less complicated spiritual interpretation of what happened. What happened may have been simply a blessing in disguise. When Dylan crashed his motorcycle in 1966, it gave him a warning sign to slow down. Had this crash not happened, Dylan could have ended up like many of his peers. Just a few years later, rock stars such as Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison would pass away in circumstances linked to the excessive life they were living. In an interview in 2020, Dylan was asked how his health was holding up. His answer was, "How does anybody do it? Your mind and body go hand in hand. There has to be some kind of agreement. I like to think of the mind as spirit and the body as substance. How you integrate those two things, I have no idea. I just try to go on a straight line and stay on it, stay on the level." And that may just be what happened during the motorcycle crash. It redressed the balance in his life and helped him stay on that level. Thanks for watching.